Hello everyone. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is right now. That's how YouTube keeps sending you more chilling stories like this. And now, let the night begin with Story 1. The Host Who Wasn't Invited. I arrived at Marcus's party around 9:30, fashionably late like he'd told everyone to be. I'd known Marcus since college. We'd been roommates sophomore year, and he'd been talking about this housewarming party for weeks. New apartment, new neighborhood, fresh start after his breakup. He was excited, almost manic about it, which wasn't like him. Marcus was usually the calm one, the planner, the guy who had his life figured out while the rest of us stumbled through our 20s. His building was one of those converted warehouses in the arts district, all exposed brick and industrial windows. I texted him when I got to the lobby, but he didn't respond. The music was already audible from the street, something with a heavy bass line that I could feel in my chest. I took the elevator to the 4th floor. Following the sound and the amber light spilling into the hallway from an open door. That's when I saw him. Marcus was standing in the hallway, maybe 15 feet from his own apartment, just staring at the open doorway. He wasn't moving. His hands hung at his sides, and his face had this expression I'd never seen on anyone before. Not quite fear, not quite confusion, but something worse. Something hollow. "Marcus," I called out, approaching him. "You okay, man?" He didn't look at me right away. His eyes stayed fixed on that open door, on the light and music and laughter pouring out of his apartment. When he finally turned to face me, his voice came out flat, mechanical. "I've been locked out for 20 minutes. I laughed, thinking he was joking. "Locked out? Dude, the door's wide open. The party's already started." "I know," he said. That's the problem. The way he said it made my skin prickle. I looked past him at the doorway. I could see people inside, shadows moving across the walls, the clink of glasses, bursts of laughter. The party was clearly in full swing. "I don't understand," I said. "What do you mean you've been locked out?" Marcus finally moved, running a hand through his hair in this jerky, agitated motion. "I left to get ice 20 minutes ago. I went to that bodega 3 blocks away, you know, the one that's always open. I had my keys in my pocket, my phone, my wallet, everything. But when I came back, the door was locked from the inside, the deadbolt. I couldn't get in. But it's open now," I pointed out, my voice uncertain. "I know." He turned back to stare at the doorway. "It opened by itself 2 minutes ago. I heard the deadbolt turn from inside. But I've been standing here watching. Nobody came out." I wanted to tell him he was being paranoid, that someone had obviously just opened the door for a guest, that there was a simple explanation. But something in his face stopped me. Marcus wasn't the type to overreact. He wasn't dramatic. If he said something was wrong, something was wrong. "Did you try calling anyone inside?" I asked. "They're not answering. I called Jake, Christine, David. Nobody's picking up. But I can hear them in there. I can hear everyone talking and laughing like nothing's wrong." We stood there for a moment, both of us staring at that open door. The music seemed too loud suddenly, the laughter too sharp. I realized I didn't recognize the song playing. Marcus had spent hours curating a playlist for this party, playing me tracks over the phone, so I'm agonizing over the order. This wasn't one of his songs. "Maybe we should just go in," I suggested, trying to sound confident. "See what's going on." Marcus swallowed hard. "Yeah. Okay, together though." We walked toward the apartment side by side. I kept expecting someone to notice us, to call out a greeting, but nobody looked our way. Through the doorway, I could see maybe 15 or 20 people scattered through the living room and kitchen. They all had drinks. They were all engaged in conversations, laughing, relaxed. It looked like any party I'd ever been to, except Marcus had been locked out in the hallway. Except the party had apparently been going for hours when he'd only left 15 minutes ago. We stepped inside together. The first thing that hit me was the smell, cigarette smoke. Marcus didn't smoke. He didn't even allow smoking in his apartment. But there was a haze in the air, a blue-gray fog that caught the light from the floor lamps and string lights he'd hung across the ceiling. "Does anyone here smoke?" I whispered to Marcus. He shook his head slowly, his eyes scanning the room. "I didn't invite anyone who smokes. I specifically didn't." The second thing I noticed was that while I recognized some faces, Jake by the kitchen counter, Christine near the bookshelf, David on the couch, there were others I didn't know at all. 7, maybe 8 people I'd never seen before, mixed in naturally with Marcus's friends like they belonged there. "Who are they?" I asked, nodding toward a woman in a red dress standing near the window. "I have no idea," Marcus breathed. "I didn't invite her." We moved deeper into the apartment. A few people glanced at us, smiled, waved, then went back to their conversations. Jake noticed Marcus and raised his beer in greeting, calling out something that was swallowed by the music. Everything seemed normal on the surface, but underneath there was something profoundly wrong, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. Then I realized nobody had greeted Marcus with surprise. Nobody had said, "Hey, there you are," or "Where have you been?" They were acting like he'd been here the whole time, like he'd just stepped out of the room for a moment. Marcus grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. "The table," he said hoarsely. I followed his gaze to the dining table against the far wall. It was covered with food, cheese plates, crackers, vegetable trays, chips, and dip. Way more food than Marcus had mentioned buying. He'd planned to keep it simple, just some basics from the grocery store. This looked catered, professionally arranged. "I didn't buy any of this," Marcus said. "The table was empty when I left, completely empty." My heart was starting to pound now. Maybe someone brought it as a gift? All of this in 15 minutes? His voice was rising, panic bleeding through. "And who set it up? Who arranged it all like this?" We stood there, frozen in the middle of Marcus's apartment, surrounded by people who seemed to think everything was perfectly fine. The woman in the red dress walked past us, so close I could smell her perfume. Something cloying and old-fashioned, like mothballs and dried roses. She smiled at me, a slow, deliberate smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Great party," she said, her voice low and musical. "Marcus always throws the best parties." She moved past before I could respond, before I could tell her that this was Marcus's first party in this apartment, that she couldn't possibly know what his parties were usually like. I watched her walk toward the hallway that led to the bedroom and bathroom, watched her disappear around the corner. "Marcus," I said slowly, "did you see that woman before, the one in red?" "She's been here since before I left," he said. "I remember seeing her when I grabbed my keys. She was standing in almost the exact same spot by the window. She hasn't moved in over 20 minutes. A chill ran down my spine. "That's not possible. You said everyone's been acting like the party's been going for hours, but you were only gone 15 minutes, Marcus finished. "I was only gone 15 minutes, but look around. Really look." I did. And once I started actually paying attention, I couldn't stop noticing the wrongness. There were too many empty beer bottles on the coffee table, dozens of them, like people had been drinking for hours. The ice bucket was already half melted. Someone had spilled red wine on the rug near the couch, and it was already dried and set, not fresh. The candles Marcus had put out were burned down to nubs, wax pooled around their bases. "This doesn't make sense," I whispered. "No," Marcus agreed. "It doesn't." Christine appeared beside us suddenly, making us both jump. She was smiling, her cheeks flushed with alcohol. "This is amazing, Marcus. I can't believe you pulled this together. Everyone's having such a great time." "Christine," Marcus said carefully, When did you get here? She laughed. Like 2 hours ago, you know that. I helped you set up the food, remember? Marcus and I exchanged glances. 2 hours ago, Marcus had been setting up by himself. I knew this because he texted me a photo of his empty living room with the caption, "The calm before the storm." Right, Marcus said faintly. Right, of course. Christine squeezed his shoulder and wandered off toward the kitchen. Marcus looked at me, his face pale. She thinks she's been here for 2 hours, he said. She has memories of helping me that never happened. What the hell is going on? Before I could answer, the music changed. The upbeat track cut off abruptly, replaced by something slower, darker. A song I definitely didn't recognize, with discordant strings and a woman's voice singing in a language I couldn't identify. None of the other guests seemed to notice. They kept talking, kept laughing, kept drinking. I didn't put this on my playlist, Marcus said. I don't even know what this is. I pulled out my phone trying to use an app to identify the song, but my signal was gone. No bars, no Wi-Fi connection, even though I'd had perfect service in the elevator. I showed Marcus my screen. Mine too, he said, checking his own phone. Dead. No signal. The woman in the red dress reappeared from the hallway. She was carrying something, a framed photo that I was certain I'd seen on Marcus's bedside table the last time I'd visited his old apartment. A picture of him and his ex-girlfriend, hiking somewhere with mountains in the background. He'd mentioned wanting to pack it away, not wanting the reminder in his new place. The woman set the photo on the mantel, adjusting it carefully, then stepped back to admire her work. She caught me watching her and smiled again, that same unsettling smile. Found this in the bedroom, she said conversationally. Thought it deserved to be displayed, such a lovely couple. That's, Marcus started, but she'd already walked away, melting back into the crowd of guests. She was in my bedroom, Marcus said, his voice hollow. That photo was packed in a box in my closet. She went through my things. I was trying to think of something reassuring to say when I noticed the man standing in the kitchen doorway. He was wearing dark jeans and a gray hoodie, his hands in his pockets, just watching the party with this detached, analytical expression. There was something familiar about him, something that made my brain itch with recognition. Marcus, I said slowly. Do you know that guy? Marcus followed my gaze. His entire body went rigid. That's not possible. What? Who is he? That's Jordan, my ex-girlfriend's brother. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper now. But he lives in Seattle, he wouldn't be here, and I definitely didn't invite him. As if sensing our attention, Jordan looked directly at us. For a long moment, we just stared at each other across the crowded apartment. Then slowly, deliberately, he raised his hand and waved. It wasn't a friendly wave. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, of recognition. Like he'd been waiting for us to notice him. We need to get everyone out, Marcus said suddenly. Right now. We need to end this party. But something is very wrong here. Someone else has been in my apartment, setting things up, bringing in strangers, going through my belongings. Someone's been pretending this party started hours ago, and everyone believes it. Everyone has false memories of things that didn't happen. He was right. Every instinct I had was screaming that we needed to leave, that we needed to get out of this apartment immediately. But before I could agree, before I could suggest we just grab our closest friends and run, the lights went out. Not all at once. They dimmed gradually, like someone was using a dial to slowly drain the power. The music warped and slowed, the singer's voice dropping to a demonic growl before cutting out entirely. In the sudden darkness, the conversation stopped. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else called out, asking what was going on. Then the lights came back on, bright and sudden and normal, and everyone was facing us. Not moving, not speaking. Just standing wherever they'd been when the lights went out, all turned toward Marcus and me, all watching us with blank, expectant expressions. 20 people, maybe more, all perfectly still and silent, including our friends. Including people we'd known for years. The woman in the red dress stood in the center of the room now, though I hadn't seen her move. She was still smiling. "The host should make a toast," she said softly. "Don't you think? Now that everyone's here." Marcus grabbed my hand, his palm slick with sweat. I could feel him trembling. "This isn't my party," he said, his voice shaking but defiant. "I don't know who you are or what you've done, but this isn't my party." The woman tilted her head, considering. "No, but it's your apartment. Your name on the lease. Your keys that locked the door." She took a step toward us. "Your friends who came when you invited them. Your party that's been going for hours now. How could it not be yours?" "I was locked out," Marcus insisted. "Someone else was here. Someone started this without me." "Were you locked out?" The woman's smile widened. "Or did you just forget you'd come back? It's so easy to forget things, isn't it? To lose track of time, to wonder if your memories are real." My legs felt weak. The room seemed to tilt and spin around me. Had Marcus really been locked out? I'd found him in the hallway, but maybe he'd just stepped out for air, gotten confused, convinced himself. No. I pushed the thought away violently. I'd seen his face. I'd heard the fear in his voice. That had been real. "Who are you?" I demanded. "Why are you doing this?" The woman ignored me, her attention fixed on Marcus. "You wanted a fresh start, new apartment, new life, new beginning. But you can't start fresh when you're still carrying everything with you, can you? All those memories, all that history, all those relationships you can't quite let go of." She gestured around the room. "So we helped. We brought it all together. Everyone you've ever known, everyone who's ever mattered, all in one place. One last party before you move on." "I want you to leave," Marcus said, his voice steadier now. "All of you, get out of my apartment." Nobody moved. The guests just kept staring at us with those blank doll-like expressions. Even Jake, even Christine, even people I'd thought I could trust. Then Jordan spoke from his position by the kitchen. "You can't end a party you didn't start, Marcus. That's not how it works." The door to the apartment swung shut with a soft click. I heard the deadbolt turn from the inside, that same mechanical sound Marcus had described hearing from the hallway. "What do you want?" Marcus asked desperately. "What do you want from me?" The woman in the red dress spread her hands. "Nothing you're not already giving, just time, just space, just the opportunity to celebrate with you one last time before everything changes." She glanced at her watch, an antique thing with a yellowed face. "We've been preparing for weeks now, ever since you signed the lease. Every time you left, every time you went to work or ran errands or slept, we've been here. Learning the layout, understanding who you are, becoming part of your life." My stomach lurched. "You've been coming in while he's been sleeping?" "Someone had to plan the party," she said simply. "Someone had to make sure everything was perfect." Marcus was shaking his head, backing toward the door, pulling me with him. "This isn't real. This isn't happening." "Oh, it's very real," the woman assured him. "Look around. Your friends are here. Your memories are here. Everything that matters is in this room right now. Everything you wanted to leave behind but couldn't." We'd reached the door. Marcus's hand closed around the deadbolt, trying to turn it, but it wouldn't move. It was locked solid, as if it had been welded in place. "You'll need a key," the woman said, "and I'm afraid those are somewhere in the apartment. You'll have to look for them. You'll have to search, and while you search, we'll keep celebrating." We'll keep your party going. We'll make sure everyone has a wonderful time. Help us, I shouted at the crowd, at our friends, at anyone who might still be themselves underneath whatever was happening. Someone help us! But nobody moved, nobody spoke. They just watched with those empty eyes, all those familiar faces turned strange and hollow. The woman in the red dress raised her glass. When had she gotten a glass? To the host, she said, and to parties that never end. The lights flickered again. In the strobing darkness, I saw something that made my blood freeze. In that instant of shadow, all the guests' faces changed. Their smiles became too wide, their eyes too bright, their proportions subtly wrong. Like masks that didn't quite fit, like something wearing human shapes but not quite getting them right. Then the lights steadied, and they were just people again, just our friends, just strangers at a party. But I'd seen it. Marcus had too. I could tell by the way his breath came in short, panicked gasps. "Find your keys," the woman said pleasantly. "They're here somewhere, and when you find them, you can leave. You can end your party." She smiled one more time. "Or you can stay. You can celebrate with us. You can let us help you remember everything you're trying to forget." The music started again, that strange, discordant song in an unknown language. The guests turned away from us, resuming their conversations as if nothing had happened. The party continued around us, relentless and wrong and impossible. Marcus and I stood with our backs pressed against the locked door, alone in a room full of people who might not be people at all. Searching for keys that might not exist, trying to end a party that someone else had started in his home, while he stood locked out in the hallway, waiting to be let back into his own life. We're still here. It's been 3 hours now, or maybe longer. I've lost track. We've searched everywhere we can think of, every drawer and closet and corner. We found other things, though. Photos we don't remember taking. Notes in handwriting that's almost Marcus's, but not quite. Evidence that someone has been living here alongside him, moving through his space, touching his things, planning this night for weeks. The guests are still celebrating. They don't seem to eat or drink, but they go through the motions. They laugh at the right moments. They talk about memories that half match reality, events that happened but differently, relationships that existed but wrong. The woman in the red dress watches us from wherever we go. She's patient. She has all the time in the world. And we're still looking for the keys, still trying to find a way out, still hoping that when we find them, if we find them, the door will actually open. But I don't think Marcus's party is ever going to end. I think we're going to be searching forever, surrounded by faces we know and faces we don't, trying to figure out which guests are real and which ones were here before we arrived, which ones Marcus invited and which ones invited themselves. Sometimes now, when I catch my reflection in the dark windows, I wonder if I was really invited either, or if I'm just another part of whatever's been orchestrated here, another piece of the celebration that someone else is hosting in Marcus's name. The music plays on, the party continues, and we keep searching, knowing that even if we find those keys, even if that door opens, we'll never be sure if we actually escaped or if this is just another room in the same endless celebration, another space where someone else is pulling the strings while we dance along, thinking we're still ourselves. Story 2. The game we shouldn't have played. The party was going fine until someone suggested we play secrets. It was Vanessa's 30th birthday, and she'd rented out this gorgeous loft in the warehouse district. Exposed brick, huge windows, string lights everywhere. About 25 of us from the office, plus a few of her friends from college. The kind of party where everyone's drinking just enough to be comfortable but not sloppy. Where conversations flow easily and nobody's checking their phone every 5 minutes. Around 10:30, after we'd done cake and presents, Vanessa's friend Lauren suggested an icebreaker game. Most of us groaned. We were adults, we didn't need icebreaker games, but Lauren insisted it would be fun. She'd played it at another party, she said, and it had been hilarious. The rules were simple. Everyone gets a slip of paper and writes down a secret, something true about themselves that nobody else in the room knows. You fold it up, drop it in a bowl, and then someone reads them all out loud while everyone tries to guess who wrote what. The person who guesses the most correctly wins. Harmless fun, Lauren said. A way to learn things about each other. I almost didn't play. Something about the idea made me uncomfortable. Not because I had any particularly dark secrets, but because there's something inherently vulnerable about putting your private thoughts on paper and passing them around a room full of people. Even people you work with every day. But everyone else was doing it, and I didn't want to be the uptight guy who couldn't take a joke, so I grabbed a pen and a slip of paper and thought about what to write. I ended up going with something mildly embarrassing but harmless. I've never seen any of the Star Wars movies. True, not particularly revealing, safe enough to share. I watched other people scribbling away, some grinning, some looking thoughtful. Some writing quickly and folding their papers like they were afraid they'd change their minds if they thought about it too long. Lauren collected all the slips in a ceramic bowl she'd found in Vanessa's kitchen. I watched people drop them in, trying to keep mental count. 25 people at the party, so 25 secrets. Lauren made a big show of mixing them up, swirling the bowl around before setting it on the coffee table. "Okay," she announced, pulling out the first slip. "Let's see what we've got." The first few secrets were exactly what you'd expect. Someone had lied on their resume about knowing Excel. Someone else had a celebrity crush on their dentist. Someone had once shoplifted a candy bar in 7th grade and still felt guilty about it. People laughed, made guesses, groaned when they were wrong. It was light, easy, exactly the kind of silly game you play at parties when you're trying to keep the energy up. Then Lauren pulled out the 4th or 5th slip and her smile faltered. She said, her eyes scanning the paper. "This one's weird." "Read it," someone called out. "That's the game." Lauren hesitated, then read aloud. "I know what happened in the bathtub in apartment 4B. I know she didn't slip. I know what you did, and I know where you buried the tile." The room went very quiet. It wasn't funny weird. It wasn't quirky or embarrassing or anything you'd actually write down as a secret at a birthday party game. It was specific and dark and wrong. "Okay, who wrote that?" Vanessa asked, trying to sound playful but not quite managing it. "That's not really in the spirit of the game, guys." Nobody answered. People looked at each other, shaking their heads, some looking confused, some uncomfortable. I watched faces, trying to figure out who might have thought that was funny, but everyone looked genuinely baffled. "Come on," Lauren pressed. "Someone wrote it. Who was it?" But nobody claimed it. The silence stretched out, awkward and heavy, until finally Vanessa laughed and said, "Okay, well, that was weird. Let's just move on to the next one." But Lauren was staring at the slip of paper with this strange expression. 4B, she said quietly. "Vanessa, this is apartment 4B, isn't it?" Vanessa nodded slowly. "Yeah, so whoever wrote this is talking about something that happened here, in this apartment." I felt cold suddenly despite the warmth of the room. Vanessa lived on the 4th floor, apartment B. The secret wasn't just random creepiness. It was specifically about this location, this space we were all standing in. "It's probably just someone being weird," Vanessa's friend Marcus said, but he didn't sound convinced. "Some joke we're not getting." "What bathtub?" someone else asked. "What are they even talking about?" Vanessa had gone pale. "I don't know," she said. "I mean, there's a bathtub in the bathroom, obviously, but nothing's happened in there. I've lived here for 8 months. Nothing's happened." Lauren was still holding the slip of paper like it might burn her. Should we keep going? Do we want to finish the game? Part of me wanted to say no, wanted to suggest we just throw out the bowl and move on to something else, put on music, pretend this hadn't happened. But I was curious now, in that awful way where you know something's wrong but you can't look away. Let's finish, I heard myself say. If it's just someone's idea of a joke, we should know who did it. So Lauren continued pulling slips from the bowl. Normal secrets resumed. Someone had hooked up with their ex last month. Someone else couldn't swim. Someone had pretended to like their mother-in-law's cooking for 15 years. The mood lightened slightly, though there was still an undercurrent of unease, all of us wondering about that one strange slip. Then, with maybe 5 or 6 papers left, Lauren pulled out another one that made her stop. This one she didn't read aloud immediately. She just stared at it, her face going white, her hand starting to shake. "What?" Vanessa asked. "What does it say?" Lauren looked up at us and I could see real fear in her eyes now. "It says, I watched you read the first secret. I saw your face change. I know you remember now, don't you, Noshta? Vanessa, you remember the woman who lived here before you. You remember what they said about her disappearance." The room erupted. People talking over each other, some laughing nervously, some genuinely disturbed. Everyone asking who wrote it, what the hell this was, whether this was some kind of sick prank. Vanessa looked like she might throw up. "This isn't funny," she said, her voice sharp. "Whoever's doing this, it's not funny. Stop it." But nobody claimed responsibility. And that's when Marcus said what we were all starting to realize. How could someone have written that? It references the first secret. It talks about Lauren reading it and Vanessa's reaction. But all the secrets were written before we started playing, before anyone read anything. He was right. The papers had all been collected at the same time, all dropped in the bowl before Lauren started reading them. There was no way someone could have written about Vanessa's reaction to the first secret because it hadn't happened yet when we were all writing. Unless someone had added a slip after we'd started playing. I looked around the room trying to count people, trying to figure out if someone had gotten up, moved toward the bowl, dropped something in while we weren't paying attention. But we'd all been sitting in the living room, all focused on Lauren as she read. Nobody had moved. I was sure of it. "Count them," I said suddenly. "Count how many secrets are in the bowl." Lauren dumped the remaining slips onto the coffee table. We counted together, everyone watching. Including the ones she'd already read, there were 26 pieces of paper. 26 secrets. But there were only 25 people at the party. "Maybe someone wrote too," Vanessa said, but her voice was hollow. "As a joke." "The handwriting," Lauren said, examining the 2 strange slips. "It's the same on both of these. Look." She held them up. The writing was distinctive. Small, cramped, slightly slanted. Whoever wrote these wrote both. But they're different from all the others. She was right. I'd been watching people write their secrets, and I'd seen normal handwriting. Some messy, some neat, but all recognizably human, recognizably individual. This writing was different. It looked almost mechanical, like someone trying very hard to make their handwriting look natural, but not quite succeeding. "Okay, this is officially freaking me out," said Amy from accounting. "Can we please just throw these away and forget about it?" But Vanessa was pulling out her phone, typing quickly. "I'm looking it up," she said. "The previous tenant. I'm looking up what happened to her." "Vanessa, don't," Lauren started, but it was too late. Vanessa's face went slack as she read whatever she'd found. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh God, there was a woman. The previous tenant, she died 2 years ago before I moved in." "How?" someone asked, though I think we all knew what Vanessa was going to say. "They found her in the bathtub. They ruled it accidental, said she slipped and hit her head, but..." Vanessa kept scrolling, kept reading. But there were questions. Some people thought it was suspicious. The tile near the tub was damaged, had to be replaced. They mentioned that in the report. Said it was consistent with her fall. But she stopped, looking up at us with wide, terrified eyes. The landlord replaced the tile before I moved in. He told me he'd done some renovations, but I never asked what kind. I never asked why. The apartment felt smaller suddenly, the walls closer. We were standing in a space where someone had died, where something suspicious had happened, where tiles had been replaced and questions had been buried along with whatever had really occurred in that bathroom. And someone in this room, or something, knew about it, knew details that hadn't been made public, knew about burial and tiles and things that weren't supposed to be known. "We need to figure out who wrote these," Marcus said, trying to sound rational and in control. "Everyone, get your secrets, find the one you wrote, let's see which one is left over." It took a few minutes, but gradually people found their own slips, held them up, confirmed what they'd written. The Star Wars confession was mine. The Excel lie, the shoplifting, the celebrity crush, the ex-hookup, all accounted for. Every normal, harmless secret claimed by someone in the room. Except for 3 slips, the 2 about the bathtub and the previous tenant. And one more that Lauren pulled from the pile, one we hadn't read yet. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. "Should I read this one?" "We've come this far," Vanessa said grimly. "Read it." Lauren unfolded the paper. When she read the words, her voice came out barely above a whisper. "I've been sitting with you all night. I played your game. I wrote my secrets like everyone else. You counted 25 people at this party, but you counted wrong. Look around the room and really see who's here. Look at everyone's faces. One of us doesn't belong. One of us has been here longer than you know. One of us never left." My heart was hammering. I looked around the room at familiar faces, co-workers I'd known for months or years, Vanessa's college friends I'd met a few times before, everyone I'd seen arrive at the party, everyone who'd been here all night. Everyone looked scared. Everyone looked confused. Everyone looked exactly like they should. But someone had written those secrets. Someone had been sitting with us, playing along, pretending to be one of the guests. Someone had dropped 3 pieces of paper in that bowl, 3 secrets that weren't secrets at all, but warnings, messages, confessions. "We need to leave," Amy said. "We need to get out of here right now." "And go where?" Vanessa shot back. "And this is my home, I live here." "Then we call the police," someone else suggested. Tell them what? That we got scary notes during a party game? That someone's pretending to be a guest?" "Check the door," I said suddenly. "Check if it's locked." Marcus was closest. He walked to the front door, tried the handle. It turned easily. "It's open. We can leave whenever we want." But nobody moved. We all just stood there, looking at each other, trying to figure out who didn't belong, who was the extra person, who had been sitting with us all night, pretending to be someone they weren't. "Let's count," Lauren said. "Everyone stand up. Let's count how many people are actually here." We did. We stood in a rough circle in Vanessa's living room and counted off, one by one, going around. I was number 7. Vanessa was number 14. Lauren was number 23. When we finished, Marcus said, 25. There are 25 people here." "So where did the extra slip come from?" Vanessa demanded. "If there are only 25 people who wrote the 26th secret?" Nobody had an answer. We stood there in silence, all of us staring at each other, and I realized something that made my skin crawl. I couldn't remember everyone arriving. The party had been going on when I got there, people already mingling, drinks already poured. I'd recognized faces, said hello to friends, but I hadn't actually watched every single person walk through the door. I didn't know for certain that everyone here had arrived tonight. What if someone had been here already? What if one of the faces I'd said hello to, one of the people I'd assumed was a co-worker or Vanessa's friend, had already been in the apartment when the first guest arrived? What if they'd just blended in, stood among us, waited for their moment? The photos, Vanessa said suddenly. We took photos earlier. The group shot when we did the cake. We can check that. Count how many people are in the picture. She pulled up the photos on her phone with shaking hands. We'd taken several group shots, everyone crowded together, arms around shoulders, smiling for the camera. Vanessa zoomed in, and we counted together. 26 people. In every single photo, there were 26 people. That's impossible, Marcus said. We just counted. There are 25 of us. Then someone left, Lauren said. Between the photos and now, someone left. But the door had been visible from where most of us were standing all night. Nobody had left. I was sure of it, almost sure. Vanessa was zooming in on different faces in the photo, trying to identify everyone. That's Marcus, and that's Amy, and that's Chris from marketing, and... She stopped, her face going white. Who is that? She held up the phone. In the back corner of the group shot, slightly out of focus, was a woman I didn't recognize. She was smiling like everyone else, her arm around the shoulder of someone I knew from Vanessa's design team, looking for all the world like she belonged there. But none of us could identify her. We passed the phone around, everyone looking, everyone trying to place her face. She looked ordinary, brown hair, maybe mid-30s, wearing a dark sweater. The kind of person who could blend into any crowd. The kind of person you might say hello to at a party and then forget about immediately after. She was here, Vanessa whispered. In my apartment, in the photo, but none of us know who she is. And she's not here now, I added, looking around the room at the 25 faces I could now account for. She was here for the photo. She might have been here when we were writing our secrets, but she's gone now. When did she leave? Marcus asked. Did anyone see someone leave? We all looked at each other. Nobody had seen anyone leave. The evening had been continuous, uninterrupted, all of us together in the same space. But somehow, between the photos and the game and this moment, one person had slipped away. The person who had written about the bathtub and the tiles and the woman who died in this apartment. The person who had been sitting with us all night, playing our game, blending in perfectly. The person who wanted us to know they'd been here, that they'd been watching, that they knew things we didn't. We never figured out who she was. Vanessa tried to find out. She contacted her landlord, looked through old tenant records, even filed a police report, though they didn't take it very seriously. Just a party crasher, they said. Happens all the time. Nothing was stolen, nobody was hurt, probably just someone looking for free drinks. But we knew better. We'd seen those secrets, read those words, counted those slips of paper. Someone had been in that apartment with us, someone who knew about the death and the tile and the questions that had never been answered. Someone who'd stood among us, smiled for photos and written their secrets in handwriting that looked almost human but not quite. I don't go to parties at people's apartments anymore. Not in that building, not in that neighborhood, not anywhere I can't be absolutely certain about who's there and who belongs. I think about that night constantly, about the woman in the photo that none of us remembered seeing in person, about the 26th secret that shouldn't have existed. And sometimes when I'm in a crowded room, I find myself counting faces, counting people, trying to make sure the number I start with matches the number I end with, trying to make sure nobody extra has slipped in while I wasn't paying attention. Trying to make sure that everyone standing around me is actually supposed to be there. Because I learned that night that it's possible to have a stranger among you and never know it. Possible for someone to stand close enough to touch, to share space and air and conversation, and for you to never realize they don't belong until they want you to. until they leave their message in a bowl full of secrets and disappear like they were never there at all. I still wonder what would have happened if we hadn't counted those slips, if we just laughed off the weird secrets and moved on with the party. Would she have stayed? Would she have kept playing along, kept pretending, kept existing in that space between guest and intruder? Or was the point always for us to realize she'd been there? To understand that our safe spaces aren't as controlled as we think. That sometimes strangers walk among us and we're none the wiser until they decide to let us know. Vanessa moved out 3 months later. She couldn't stay in that apartment anymore, couldn't take baths without thinking about tiles and slips and things buried under renovations. She couldn't have people over without counting them obsessively, without checking and rechecking that she knew everyone's name and face and reason for being there. The rest of us don't really talk about that night. It's become this unspoken thing, this shared experience we all pretend didn't happen because acknowledging it means accepting something we don't want to accept. That we were in a room with someone who shouldn't have been there, and we never knew. That they watched us and listened to us and smiled in our photos, and then they left us a message to make sure we understood how vulnerable we'd been, how easily they'd moved among us, how simple it had been to pretend. Story 3, The Plus One. Nobody knew my sister Emily's engagement party was supposed to be perfect. She'd been planning it for months, a garden party at this beautiful outdoor venue, string lights in the trees, a live acoustic guitarist, all her favorite people gathered to celebrate her and David before the big wedding next spring. I was her maid of honor, so I'd been helping with everything, the invitations, the guest list, the seating arrangements. I knew everyone who was supposed to be there. I'd checked them off the list myself as they arrived. That's why I still can't explain the woman in the dark dress. She was there from the beginning, or at least from early on. I remember seeing her during cocktail hour, standing near the hors d'oeuvres table with a glass of wine, talking to David's college friends. At the time, I assumed she'd come with one of them. Maybe someone's girlfriend or wife I hadn't met yet. She fit in so naturally, laughing at the right moments, nodding along to stories that it never occurred to me to question it. She was wearing a dark blue dress, almost black, that looked elegant but not showy. Her hair was up in a neat bun. She might have been 35 or 45. One of those ageless faces that's hard to pin down. Pretty in an unremarkable way. The kind of person you might walk past on the street and forget 5 seconds later. I saw her throughout the party. When Emily and David cut the cake, she was standing in the crowd, clapping along with everyone else. When Emily's best friend from college gave a toast, the woman was near the back, smiling and raising her glass. When we took group photos, she drifted to the edges, never quite in the center, but always present in the background. She seemed to know people. I watched her hug Emily's Aunt Margaret. I saw her talking animatedly with David's cousin Ryan. She knew inside jokes. I heard her laugh at a reference to Emily's infamous fear of chickens, something only close friends and family knew about. She moved through the party like she belonged there, like she'd known Emily and David for years. It wasn't until the party was winding down, when the photographer was packing up and people were starting to say their goodbyes, that Emily pulled me aside. "Hey, weird question," she said, her cheeks flushed from champagne and happiness. "Who was that woman? The one in the dark blue dress?" "Which one?" I asked, though I knew exactly who she meant. There had only been one woman in a dark blue dress. "That's the thing, I don't know. I thought she came with David's friends, but I asked him, and he thought she came with my college friends. But nobody seems to know who she is." A cold feeling started in my stomach. "What do you mean nobody knows?" "I mean, we've been asking around and everyone assumed she was someone else's guest. Nobody actually knows her name. Nobody invited her. I tried to remember who I'd seen the woman talking to, who she'd hugged, who she'd stood with. She seemed to know people, though. I saw her with Aunt Margaret. I saw her talking to Ryan. Emily pulled out her phone, already pulling up the contact. Let me call Aunt Margaret. But when she did, Aunt Margaret didn't remember anyone in a dark blue dress. She didn't remember being hugged by anyone she didn't know. Ryan didn't remember having a conversation with a stranger. David's college friends had no idea who we were talking about. One by one, Emily called the people I'd seen the woman interact with, and one by one, they all said the same thing. They didn't remember her. Didn't remember seeing her, talking to her, standing next to her. It was like she'd been invisible to everyone except Emily and me, and even we couldn't remember any specific conversations with her, any actual interactions. Just glimpses, sightings, or the sense of her presence throughout the party. The photos, I said. The photographer took pictures all night. She'll be in those. We found the photographer just as she was loading her equipment into her car. Emily explained what we were looking for, and the photographer, looking confused but patient, pulled up the photos on her camera's display screen. And there she was, in dozens of photos, always in the background, never quite in focus, but definitely there. Standing behind people in group shots, visible through doorways in candid moments. At the edge of the dance floor, near the gift table, by the garden arch. In every single photo, she was looking at the camera, not posing, not smiling really, just looking. Even when everyone else was looking away, laughing, talking to each other, she was looking directly at the lens. At us. Like she knew we'd be looking at these photos later. Like she wanted to make sure we saw her. That's unsettling, the photographer said, zooming in on one of the shots. I don't remember seeing her. You'd think I would have noticed someone staring at the camera all night. Emily was scrolling through the photos on the display, her face pale. Look at this one. She'd stopped on a group shot from early in the party when people were just starting to arrive. The woman was visible in the background, standing near the entrance to the venue. What time did you take this? The photographer checked the metadata. 6:47 p.m. That was right when things were starting. That's weird, Emily said slowly. The party didn't officially start until 7. This was during setup. Only family and wedding party were here this early. She shouldn't have been here yet. We kept scrolling. In the earliest photos, before most guests had arrived, there she was, standing outside the venue, visible through the fence, just watching. Not trying to get in, not looking confused or lost, just standing there, watching. Oh God, Emily whispered, stopping on one particular photo. Oh God, look when this was taken. The timestamp read 3:45 p.m., 3 hours before the party started. The photo showed the venue's exterior, probably a test shot the photographer had taken while checking lighting. And there, on the sidewalk across the street, barely visible but unmistakable in her dark blue dress, was the woman. She'd been there for hours before the party even started, just standing outside, just watching the venue, waiting. Did either of you see her leave? The photographer asked. After the party ended, did you see her go? We hadn't. We'd been so focused on saying goodbye to everyone else, on making sure Emily and David had a chance to thank all their guests, that neither of us had noticed when the woman in the dark blue dress disappeared. She'd just been there, part of the background. And then at some point, we couldn't say when, she'd been gone. Emily and I went back through the venue, even though by now almost everyone had left. We asked the remaining guests, the caterers, the musicians. Nobody remembered seeing anyone in a dark blue dress. A few people thought they maybe remembered someone matching that description, but they couldn't say for sure. Couldn't remember any interactions, couldn't tell us anything specific. It was like she'd been there and not there at the same time. Present in photos, but absent from memory. Visible but unnoticed. There but not invited. David found us 20 minutes later, both of us sitting at one of the abandoned tables, Emily's phone between us, scrolling through the photos again and again. "Still trying to figure out who she was?" he asked, sitting down beside Emily. "It doesn't make sense," Emily said. "She was here for hours, people talked to her. She knew things about us, inside jokes, personal stories. But nobody remembers her. Nobody invited her. Nobody knows who she is." David looked at the photos, his expression growing more concerned with each one. "We should call the police," he said finally. "This is stalking, right? This is someone who clearly knew about the party, showed up uninvited, stayed for hours. That's not normal." We did call them. A bored-sounding officer came out, took our statement, looked at the photos. He said it was concerning but not technically illegal. It had been a semi-public event at a venue. The woman hadn't threatened anyone or stolen anything, hadn't caused any disturbance. Without knowing who she was, there wasn't much they could do. He suggested we make sure to have better security at the actual wedding. That was 3 months ago. We never found out who she was. The venue didn't have security cameras. None of the guests recognized her when we sent around the photos. We posted on social media asking if anyone knew her identity, but got nothing useful. Just a flood of creepy comments and unhelpful speculation. But here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. Emily did some digging. She contacted the venue, asked if anything like this had happened before. And the events coordinator, after some hesitation, told her about 2 other parties in the past year where guests had reported seeing someone who shouldn't have been there. Someone who'd blended in perfectly but that nobody could later identify. Someone who appeared in the background of photos but that nobody remembered actually meeting. At a birthday party 6 months ago, a man in a gray suit that nobody invited and nobody knew. At an anniversary celebration before that, a woman in a red dress who'd apparently been there for hours but that the hosts couldn't identify afterward. Different people, different parties, but the same pattern. Appearing early, staying late, blending in perfectly, visible in photos, invisible in memory. The venue coordinator had thought it was just confused guests. People forgetting faces in the chaos of a party. But now, talking to Emily, hearing the same story again, she wasn't so sure. She said she was going to start checking security footage more carefully, keeping better track of who came and went. But I don't think that's going to help. Because I think whoever these people are, whether it's one person or many, whether there's some explanation we're missing, they're good at this. They've practiced. They know how to move through a crowd without being noticed. How to act like they belong, how to make you think you know them even when you don't. They know how to be there and not there, present and absent, real and unreal. Emily moved the wedding to a different venue. She hired security. She made sure every single guest had to show ID at the entrance, had to be checked against the list. She was taking no chances, but I still wonder if it'll matter. I wonder if the woman in the dark blue dress or someone like her will find a way to be there anyway. Standing in the background, watching through windows, appearing in photos with that same calm, knowing expression. Present at the celebration, uninvited and unwelcome, but somehow inevitable. I've started noticing people more at events I go to. Parties, gatherings, anytime there's a crowd. I find myself studying faces, trying to figure out if I actually know everyone there, if everyone present was actually invited, and sometimes I see someone who doesn't quite fit, someone who's there but doesn't seem connected to anyone specific, someone who blends in just a little too well. And I wonder if they're like the woman from Emily's engagement party. If there's someone who attends celebrations they weren't invited to, who watches and waits and photographs himself into memories that don't actually include them. Someone who knows that in a crowd, in the chaos and joy of a party, it's easy to slip in unnoticed, Easy to be accepted as belonging when you act like you do. The scariest part isn't that she was there. It's that we let her be there. We saw her. We accepted her presence. We let her exist among us for hours without questioning it. We let her into Emily's special moment, into our family gathering, into our memories. And only later, only when we actually stopped to think about it, did we realize she was a stranger, that she'd been watching us all night while we smiled and celebrated and took photos, oblivious to the uninvited guest who'd been there all along. I don't know what she wanted. I don't know why she came. I don't know if she'll be at the wedding or at the next party I go to, or already was at past events I've attended, standing in the background, watching, photographing, being present in a way I'll only notice later when I look at the pictures and see a face I don't recognize staring back at me. All I know is that sometimes when I'm at a gathering, I catch myself counting the guests, comparing the number to the list, trying to make sure everyone there is supposed to be there, trying to spot the extra person, the uninvited watcher, the dark dress or gray suit or red dress standing at the edges, blending in, acting like they belong. Because they're out there, people who attend parties they weren't invited to, who slip into celebrations uninvited, who document other people's joy for reasons we can't understand. And the terrifying truth is that we probably won't notice them until after they're gone, until we look at the photos and see the face we don't recognize, the person we don't remember meeting, the stranger who spent hours among us while we celebrated and laughed and never once realized we should be afraid. Story 4. What we found in the basement. The basement of Sigma Alpha Chi was off limits. Had been for as long as anyone currently in the house could remember. There was a padlock on the door, rusty and old, and none of the current brothers had a key. When I pledged my sophomore year, one of the seniors told me it was just old storage, stuff left behind by brothers from decades ago, junk that nobody wanted to sort through. Nothing interesting or nothing worth bothering with. The door was at the end of the first-floor hallway, past the bathrooms, easy to ignore most of the time. It was just part of the house, like the weird water stain on the living room ceiling or the bedroom door on the third floor that stuck. You stopped noticing it after a while, until Halloween weekend my junior year when we threw the biggest party of the semester. We'd started setting up Friday afternoon, kegs in the backyard, trash cans full of ice and cheap beer. The pledges hauling speakers out of storage and stringing up orange lights. By 9 p.m. the house was packed, easily 200 people crammed into every room, music throbbing through the walls, everyone in costume, everyone drunk or getting there. Around midnight I was in the kitchen getting another beer when I heard shouting from the hallway. Not party shouting, not drunk people being loud, but something else. Panic maybe, or shock. I pushed through the crowd and found 3 pledges standing by the basement door, which was hanging open, the old padlock on the ground. "Who broke the lock?" I demanded. We'd been pretty clear with the pledges. No fucking around with restricted areas during parties. That was how you got the house put on probation. Tyler, one of the freshmen, looked pale even under the orange party lights. We didn't mean to. We were just messing around and it was already rusted through and it just came off. "Okay, whatever," I said, moving to close the door. "Just stay away from..." "There's something down there," Tyler interrupted. "Something wrong." I stopped. "What do you mean?" "Just look. You should look." The other 2 pledges nodded, both of them looking spooked in a way that seemed off for drunk college kids at a Halloween party. Marcus, the bigger of the 3, was actually shaking. "Fine," I sighed, pulling out my phone and turning on the flashlight. "But if this is some kind of prank, you're all cleaning the bathrooms for a month." The stairs were wooden, steep, descending into darkness that my phone's light barely penetrated. The music from the party was muffled here, reduced to a distant bass throb. The air smelled wrong, stale and cold with an undertone of something else, something musty and organic. "It's at the bottom," Tyler said from behind me. "On the right." I made my way down carefully, the old steps creaking under my weight. The basement was unfinished, just concrete floor and exposed ceiling joists, pipes, and electrical conduit snaking overhead. My light swept across old furniture, stacked boxes, the kind of accumulated junk you'd expect. Then I saw what Tyler meant. In the far corner, someone had set up what looked like a living space, a sleeping bag on a thin camping mattress. Plastic bags that looked like they'd contained food now empty. A battery-powered lantern sitting on a crate. And on the walls, photos. Dozens and dozens of photos pinned up with thumbtacks, creating a collage that covered the concrete from floor to ceiling. Photos of us, the brothers, at parties, in the house, around campus. Some were clearly taken through windows. I could see the reflection of glass, the slight distortion. Others were taken from strange angles, like someone had been hiding, shooting from behind furniture or through partially open doors. I stepped closer, my skin crawling, my heart hammering. There were photos from last week's party, photos from the kegger we'd thrown for freshman orientation. Photos from studying in the library, from walking to class, from sitting in the dining hall. Someone had been following us, documenting us for months, and in every single photo there were notes. Handwritten labels in small, neat print. Ryan, accounting major, girlfriend Sarah, allergic to shellfish, parks in spot 47. Marcus, pre-med, takes Xanax, leaves ground floor window unlocked. Personal information, private details, things you wouldn't know unless you'd been watching closely, listening carefully, gathering intelligence. "Holy shit," Tyler breathed beside me. "Someone's been living down here." He was right. The sleeping bag still had an indentation like someone had been lying in it recently. The food wrappers looked fresh. I reached out to touch the mattress. It was slightly warm. "We need to get everyone out," I said, my voice coming out weird and tight. "Right now. We need to get everyone out of the house." "But now!" I grabbed Tyler's arm, pulling him toward the stairs. "Someone's been living in our basement. Someone's been watching us, photographing us, collecting information about us. They could still be here. They could be at the party right now." We stumbled back up the stairs, and I grabbed the first brother I saw, Kevin, dressed as a zombie, and told him to get everyone upstairs to clear out the first floor. Word spread fast, the way it does in a house full of drunk people who suddenly realize something's very wrong. Within 10 minutes, we had everyone gathered on the second and third floors, confused and annoyed and starting to sober up as they realized this wasn't a joke. I went back down with Kevin and 2 other seniors. We needed to see the extent of it, needed to document everything before calling the police. The basement seemed darker this time, more oppressive, even with all 4 of our phone lights cutting through the gloom. The living space was worse than I'd initially realized. There was more than one sleeping bag, 3 total arranged in different corners, like whoever had been staying there moved around regularly, maybe to avoid being in the same spot too long. There were more food wrappers than I'd first seen, weeks worth at least, maybe months. A bucket in the corner that I didn't want to examine too closely. And the photos. God, the photos. There were hundreds of them, maybe more, covering every available wall space. Not just of current brothers, there were photos of guys who'd graduated last year, even some from the year before that. Someone had been doing this for years, living down here, documenting the house, building this bizarre archive of information and surveillance. Kevin found a box under one of the sleeping bags. Inside were more photos, these organized into neat folders labeled with names. Every brother who'd lived in the house over the past 3 years had a folder filled with photos and notes about their schedules, their habits, their friends and family, their weaknesses. My folder was there. I flipped it open with shaking hands. There were photos of me from angles I'd never have expected, through my bedroom window in the shower room when I'd thought I was alone sleeping in my bed. Notes about what time I usually went to class, which coffee shop I preferred, where my girlfriend lived, what medications I took. Everything someone would need to know to infiltrate my life, to hurt me, to destroy me if they wanted. "We need to call the police," Kevin said, his voice hollow. "Right now. This is fucking insane." But before anyone could pull out their phone, we heard it. A sound from somewhere else in the basement, deeper in the shadows beyond our lights. Movement, the shuffle of feet on concrete. We froze. The party noise from upstairs had mostly died down, people talking in worried whispers, so the basement was relatively quiet. Quiet enough to hear breathing. Not our breathing, someone else's, coming from the darkness beyond our circle of light. "Who's there?" Kevin called out, trying to sound authoritative but not quite managing it. "You need to come out, we're calling the police." No answer, just that breathing, steady and calm, and the sense of someone watching us from the shadows. Someone who'd been living beneath us for months, maybe years, who knew every detail of our lives, who'd been documenting and studying and waiting. "We're leaving," I said quietly. "Right now. Back up the stairs. Don't run, don't turn your back completely, just move." We did, walking backward in a cluster, our lights pointed into the darkness, trying to catch a glimpse of whoever was there. For just a second, right before we reached the stairs, my light caught something. A figure pressed against the far wall, partially hidden behind a support pillar. I couldn't make out details, just a silhouette motionless watching us. Then we were on the stairs, climbing fast, and Kevin slammed the door shut behind us. Someone found a chair and wedged it under the doorknob, as if that would do anything if someone really wanted to get out. The police came 20 minutes later. They went down with flashlights and weapons drawn while we waited in the living room, all of us sober now, all of us scared. They were down there for maybe 15 minutes, searching methodically, checking every corner. When they came back up, the lead officer looked grim. "Whoever was staying there is gone," he said. "There's a window back there, ground level on the outside, hidden behind some bushes. Looks like it was pried open recently. They probably went out that way while you were calling us." "Did you see all the photos?" I asked. "All the information they collected about us?" "We saw it. We're going to need statements from all of you. This is serious. This is stalking, breaking, and entering, possibly more depending on what we find. We'll have forensics go through everything tomorrow, try to get fingerprints, DNA, anything that might tell us who was living there." But I could see in his face that he didn't think they'd find much. Whoever had been in our basement was careful, methodical, patient. They'd been doing this for years without getting caught. They'd been living underneath us, watching us through vents and floorboards, attending our parties maybe. The thought made my stomach turn. Attending classes with us, being someone we saw every day without realizing they were the person who'd been documenting our lives from the shadows. The party was over, obviously. People left in groups, scared, nobody wanting to walk home alone. The house cleared out by 2 a.m., leaving just the brothers and a few close friends who didn't want to leave us alone. We stayed up all night, all of us in the living room, taking turns checking the basement door, making sure it stayed shut. None of us wanted to go back down there. None of us wanted to sleep in our rooms knowing that someone had been taking photos through our windows, possibly for years, possibly while we were sleeping. The police investigation took weeks. They found fingerprints on the photos and the crates, but they didn't match anyone in the system. The sleeping bags and food wrappers yielded nothing useful. The window had been used multiple times, they said, probably for months, maybe longer. Whoever had been living there had been coming and going regularly, carefully, never arousing suspicion. They never found who it was. The investigation eventually went cold, classified as an unsolved case of breaking and entering and stalking. They told us to install better locks, to check our rooms regularly, to be vigilant. As if any of that would help against someone who'd managed to live in our house for years without anyone noticing. Most of the brothers moved out. The house was put on probation by the university for failing to maintain secure premises. By the end of the semester, Sigma Alpha Chi had dissolved, the few remaining members transferring to other fraternities or moving off campus. The house itself was sold, eventually converted into regular student apartments. But sometimes I still think about those photos, about the level of detail in those notes, the obsessive documentation of our lives. I think about how many times we'd had parties with hundreds of strangers in the house, how many of those strangers we'd assumed were friends of friends, dates, classmates. How many times the person from the basement could have been standing right next to us, drinking our beer, listening to our conversations, and we never would have known. I think about the dates on some of those photos. Some of them were from parties I remembered clearly, parties where nothing seemed wrong, where everyone seemed like they belonged. But the photos had been taken from inside the house, from angles that suggested someone standing in the room with us, not hiding, not sneaking, just present. Part of the crowd, invisible in plain sight, and I wonder if they found another house, another basement, another group of unsuspecting people to watch and document and study. Whether right now, somewhere, there's a college kid throwing a party, inviting friends, never realizing that beneath their feet someone's been living in their basement for months. Someone who's been photographing them through windows and vents, learning their schedules, their habits, their weaknesses. Someone who's been building files on them, collecting their secrets, waiting. I moved to a different city after graduation. I live in a fourth-floor apartment with no basement, no ground-floor windows, security cameras in the lobby. I check my closets and under my bed every night before sleeping. I keep my curtains drawn constantly. I'm careful about what I post on social media, about what personal information I share, about who I let into my space. But I still can't shake the feeling that someone's watching. That someone's out there with my folder, my photos, my information. That years of my life were documented by a stranger who lived beneath me, who knew things about me I barely knew about myself. And that they're still out there somewhere, with all that knowledge, all those images, all those intimate details of who I was and maybe still am. The worst part isn't even that someone was in the basement. It's that they might have been at the parties. They might have been someone I talked to, laughed with, stood next to. They might have been there the whole time, not hiding in the basement, but walking among us, and we never knew. We never suspected. We let them be there, trusted they belonged, and only realized later, too late, that a stranger had been with us all along. Story 5. The birthday girl who never arrived. Emma's surprise party was my idea, so when everything went wrong, I felt responsible. She'd been my best friend since middle school, and she'd been having a rough year. Bad breakup, stressful new job, barely enough time to breathe. Her birthday fell on a Saturday, and I thought a surprise party with her closest friends would be perfect. Small, intimate, just the people she loved most. She'd mentioned a few weeks earlier that she'd finally moved into a new apartment after living with her ex. I asked for her new address, pretending I wanted to send her a birthday card. She texted it to me. 427 Riverside Drive, apartment 3F. I saved it in my phone, started planning. I got her spare key from her mom. Emma had left one with her parents when she first moved in case of emergencies. I recruited 8 of our mutual friends, swore them all to secrecy, and we planned everything for the Saturday afternoon of her birthday. We'd let ourselves in, set up decorations, hide, and surprise her when she came home from her shift at the hospital. Saturday morning, 6 of us met at a coffee shop near Riverside Drive to coordinate. We had balloons, streamers, a cake from Emma's favorite bakery, a stack of presents. Everyone was excited, laughing about how shocked she'd be, how perfect it was going to turn out. We arrived at 427 Riverside Drive around 2 p.m. It was a nice building, brick exterior, tree-lined street, exactly the kind of place Emma would choose. The lobby required a key, but Emma's spare key worked perfectly. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor, found 3F, and I unlocked the door. The apartment was beautiful. Hardwood floors, big windows with afternoon light streaming in, tasteful furniture in soft grays and blues. Very Emma. There were plants on the windowsill, succulents and a fiddle-leaf fig she'd probably been nurturing carefully. Books on the shelf, throw pillows on the couch, everything arranged just so. "This is so her," my friend Jessica said, looking around approvingly. "She's really got her life together." We got to work. Balloons tied to the furniture, streamers hung from the ceiling. A banner that said, "Happy Birthday, Emma," stretched across the living room. The cake went in the fridge, presents stacked on the coffee table. We were laughing, taking photos, proud of how good everything looked. Emma's shift at the hospital ended at 4, and she lived about 20 minutes away, or so I thought. We finished setting up by 3:30 and settled in to wait, everyone finding spots to hide. Some people crouched behind the couch, others in the kitchen, a few in the hallway leading to the bedroom. We kept our voices to whispers, phones on silent, giddy with anticipation. 4 o'clock came and went, then 4:30. By 5, we were starting to text each other, confused. Had her shift run late? Was she stopping somewhere on the way home? At 5:15, I texted Emma directly, "Hey, how's your birthday going? Doing anything fun tonight?" She responded almost immediately. "Just relaxing at home. Tired from work. Probably just going to order takeout and watch Netflix." I stared at my phone, confused. Home? She was supposed to be on her way home. She wasn't here yet. I texted back, "You're at home now?" "Yeah, got here an hour ago." Why? An hour ago would have been 4:15, but we'd been in her apartment since 2 p.m. and she definitely hadn't come home. We would have heard her, seen her, been hiding ready to jump out and surprise her. "What's your address?" I typed, my hands starting to shake. 147 Riverside Terrace, 3F. Same as I told you, why are you being weird? I read the message 3 times. 147 Riverside Terrace, not 427 Riverside Drive. 2 different addresses, 2 different buildings, 2 different apartments. I stood up from behind the couch, my face hot with embarrassment and something else. Something colder, more unsettling. Jessica noticed, came over, whispered, "What's wrong?" "We're in the wrong apartment," I said, my voice barely audible. "This isn't Emma's place." "What?" "The address. I got it wrong. Emma lives at 147 Riverside Terrace. We're at 427 Riverside Drive." The color drained from Jessica's face. But the key worked. You used her spare key and it opened the door." She was right. I'd used Emma's key, the one her mother had given me, and it had worked perfectly in the lock downstairs and in the apartment door. How was that possible? Slowly, people emerged from their hiding spots as I explained the situation. Everyone looked confused, then horrified, then panicked. We'd spent over 3 hours in a stranger's apartment. We'd hung decorations, put food in their fridge, gone through their home without permission. "We need to clean up and get out," Marcus said. "Right now, before whoever lives here comes home." We scrambled to undo everything we'd done, pulled down the streamers, popped the balloons, took down the banner, retrieved the cake from the fridge, gathered the presents, stuffed everything back into bags. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip anything. That's when Jessica, who'd been helping take down decorations in the hallway, called out in a weird voice, "Guys, you need to see this." We crowded into the hallway, looking where she was pointing. The wall was covered with framed photos, family pictures, vacation shots, the kind of thing everyone has in their homes. Except none of the people in the photos were anyone we knew. Not Emma, not any of her family. The people in these photos were strangers. A middle-aged couple, 2 teenage boys, grandparents, a golden retriever. "This definitely isn't Emma's apartment," Marcus said unnecessarily. But here's what made my skin crawl. The apartment looked like Emma's style. The furniture, the colors, the decor, it was all stuff she would choose. The books on the shelf included titles I knew she loved. The throw pillows were the exact pattern she'd shown me online last month, saying she wanted to buy them for her new place. "Maybe she has the same taste as whoever lives here," Jessica suggested, but her voice was uncertain. I walked further into the apartment, really looking now, my heart pounding. In the kitchen, the coffee maker was the same brand Emma had just bought. In the bathroom, the shower curtain was identical to one Emma had posted on Instagram last week. The bedroom, I shouldn't have looked but I did, had the same gray comforter Emma had ordered online. The same nightstand she'd been so excited about finding at a thrift store. It was like someone had decorated this apartment to match Emma's tastes exactly. Or like Emma had decorated her apartment to match this one. "How is this possible?" I whispered, standing in the bedroom doorway, staring at the too familiar space. "Maybe you got the address wrong, but this is actually some weird coincidence," Marcus said, but he didn't sound convinced. "Maybe it's just..." "The key," I interrupted. "Emma's spare key worked on this apartment, on a completely different building, a different address. How does that make sense?" Nobody had an answer. We stood there in this stranger's apartment, surrounded by their things that looked like Emma's things, in a space that felt like Emma's space, and tried to understand how we'd ended up here. "We should leave," Jessica said, "right now before someone comes home and calls the police." She was right. We grabbed our bags, checked that we'd removed all evidence of our presence, and headed for the door. I was the last one out, and I couldn't help but look back one more time at the apartment, at the perfect recreation of what Emma might live like, or what someone thought Emma might live like. Then I saw it. On the mantel, partially hidden behind a decorative bowl, was a photo frame. I don't know why I walked back to look at it. Curiosity, dread, some instinct that told me I needed to see it. The photo showed a young woman, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair and a bright smile, standing in front of a landmark I recognized, the fountain in Central Park. She looked happy, carefree, caught in a moment of pure joy. She also looked almost exactly like Emma. Not identical, the features were slightly different. The hair a shade darker, but close enough that if you glanced quickly you might think it was her. A sister maybe, or a cousin. Someone related, or someone trying to look like her. My hands went cold. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the frame, then put it back exactly where I'd found it. Then I got the hell out of that apartment, locking the door behind me, my friends already waiting by the elevator with scared, confused faces. We left the building in silence, climbed into our cars, and drove straight to 147 Riverside Terrace, Emma's actual address. It was only 4 blocks away, an older building, less fancy than the one we'd just left. We buzzed Emma's apartment and she let us up, confused about why we were all showing up together unannounced. Her apartment was nothing like the other one. It was smaller, more cluttered, with mismatched furniture and boxes still unpacked in the corners. The decor was different. Brighter colors, different style, none of the carefully curated cohesion of the other place. This was what a recently single woman's new apartment actually looked like, not some staged perfection. "Surprise?" I said weakly when she opened the door. "We planned a party at your place, but there was a mix-up with the address." Emma looked at us, at our bags full of decorations and the cake we'd somehow managed not to drop, and laughed. "You guys are disasters, but I love you for trying." We told her about the wrong address, though we didn't mention how eerily similar that apartment had been to what we'd expected from her. We didn't mention the photo on the mantle, or the fact that her spare key had worked on the wrong door. We just laughed it off, blamed my bad handwriting, set up a smaller version of the party in her actual apartment, and tried to enjoy the evening. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, after the party, I looked up the address of the wrong apartment online. The building didn't have a tenant directory, but I found property records. Apartment 3F at 427 Riverside Drive was owned by a woman named Eleanor Marsh. The name meant nothing to me. I reverse image searched the photo I'd taken of the frame. Nothing useful came up, just a generic photo of Central Park, probably taken by a tourist, no identifying information. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have. I called Emma's mom. "Hey, Mrs. Chen, quick question. When did Emma give you her spare key when she first moved?" "Spare key?" Mrs. Chen sounded confused. "Emma didn't give me a spare key, honey, but she said she was going to, but she's been so busy with the move she hasn't gotten around to making copies yet." My blood went cold. "But you gave me her spare key last week for the surprise party." A long pause. "Sweetie, I didn't give you anything. I haven't seen you since Emma's graduation party last year." I stood there in my apartment, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process what she was saying. "Mrs. Chen, someone gave me a key. Someone said they were you over the phone and told me where to pick up Emma's spare key. It was at the coffee shop on Grant Street in an envelope taped under a table in the back. The envelope had Emma's name on it." Another pause, longer this time. When Mrs. Chen spoke again, her voice was tight with worry. "I never did that. I don't know what you're talking about. Are you saying someone pretended to be me?" Someone had. Someone had called me, claiming to be Emma's mother, had known about my plan for the surprise party, and had directed me to a key that was waiting in a specific location. A key that opened an apartment that wasn't Emma's but was decorated almost exactly how Emma would decorate a place. Someone who knew Emma well enough to replicate her style. Someone who knew me well enough to know I was planning a party. Someone who'd set this up carefully, deliberately, leading me to the wrong address with the right key. But why? I thanked Mrs. Chen, told her not to worry, said it must have been some weird misunderstanding. But after I hung up, I sat on my couch for a long time thinking about that apartment, about how perfect it had looked, about the photo on the mantle of the woman who looked almost like Emma, about how someone had been expecting us, the decorations we'd hung, the cake in the fridge, the banner with Emma's name. We'd left evidence in that apartment that we'd been there, that we thought it was hers. And whoever lived there, whoever Eleanor Marsh was, would come home to find proof that people had been in her space preparing for a party, using a key that shouldn't exist. Or maybe she wouldn't be surprised at all. Maybe she'd been expecting it. Maybe the whole thing had been arranged, orchestrated, designed to make us go to that specific apartment on that specific day. Maybe someone wanted us there, wanted us to see that space, wanted us to know that someone was paying attention to Emma, studying her, replicating her. I never told Emma the full story. I didn't want to scare her, didn't want to make her paranoid. But I did suggest she change her locks, install a deadbolt, be careful about who she gave her information to. She agreed, laughing about how I was being overprotective, but she did it. And I kept that photo I'd taken, the one of the frame from the mantle. Sometimes I look at it, at that woman who looks almost like my best friend, and I wonder who she was. Whether she was real or just another carefully placed detail in an apartment designed to confuse and unsettle us. I wonder about Eleanor Marsh, whether that's even her real name. Whether she came home that day and found evidence of our presence. Whether she knew we'd be there. Whether the whole thing was a message, a warning, a demonstration of how easily someone could access Emma's life, her space, her friends. Because someone gave me that key. Someone led me to that apartment. Someone knew enough about Emma to create a space that looked like hers, and someone knew enough about me to predict I'd use a key without questioning it, would walk into a stranger's home and make myself comfortable. And I don't know who that someone is. I don't know what they wanted, what they were trying to accomplish, what their end game might be. All I know is that somewhere in this city there's an apartment that looks like it belongs to my best friend but doesn't. An apartment someone carefully prepared, carefully staged, carefully designed for reasons I can't understand. And someone out there has a key that works on doors it shouldn't open. Someone who knows where Emma lives, knows who her friends are, knows how to manipulate situations to make us go where they want us to go. Emma still lives at 147 Riverside Terrace. As far as I know, nothing else strange has happened. But I walk past 427 Riverside Drive sometimes on my way to other places, and I look up at the third floor at apartment 3F and I wonder what's happening in there now. Whether someone's still living in that space that looks like Emma's life. Whether they're still watching her, still studying her, still preparing for something I can't predict. And whether one day Emma will come home to find something waiting for her that she doesn't expect. Something that proves someone's been paying attention all along, learning her patterns, replicating her choices, getting ready for a moment when they'll stop pretending and show her exactly how well they know her. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it was all just coincidence, confusion, some bizarre series of mistakes. But late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that key that opened the wrong door. And I wonder how many other doors it opens, how many other apartments it accesses, how many other lives someone is studying, replicating, preparing to enter when the moment is right. Story 6. The noise from upstairs New Year's Eve at my apartment was supposed to be low-key. Just 10 or 12 close friends, good food, decent wine, countdown at midnight. I'd moved into the building 6 months earlier, a 3-story walk-up in a quiet neighborhood, and this was my first time hosting anything bigger than a dinner party. I wanted it to be perfect. My upstairs neighbor, Carl, had stopped by a few days before to let me know he'd be out of town for the holidays. He was visiting family in Minnesota, wouldn't be back until January 3rd. I'd helped him carry his luggage down to his car when he left. 2 big suitcases, a garment bag, enough stuff for a proper trip. He'd thanked me, told me to have a great party, said not to worry about noise since he wouldn't be there to complain. The party started around 8. My friends arrived in pairs and small groups, everyone in good spirits, ready to celebrate the end of a long year. Music playing, conversations flowing, laughter echoing through my apartment. By 10 p.m. we were getting loud, not obnoxiously so, but definitely louder than normal. The kind of volume that happens when everyone's a little drunk and a lot happy. That's when we heard it. The footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps from the apartment directly above us. Pacing back and forth across what I knew was Carl's living room right over my head. Steady, rhythmic, like someone walking the same path over and over. "Your neighbor home?" my friend Rachel asked, glancing at the ceiling. "No, he's out of town," I said. "Left 3 days ago. I watched him go." "Maybe he came back early?" I pulled out my phone, texted Carl. "Hey, thought you were in Minnesota? You upstairs?" No response. The footsteps continued, heavy enough that my hanging light fixture swayed slightly with each pass. Back and forth, always covering the same stretch of floor. "Maybe it's someone else in the building," suggested Tom. "Sound carries weird in old buildings." But I knew it wasn't. I'd lived here long enough to know the acoustic signature of my own ceiling. to recognize when someone was walking directly above me versus 2 floors up or in an adjacent unit. This was Carl's apartment. Someone was in Carl's apartment. Maybe he's house-sitting, Rachel offered. Maybe Carl asked someone to check on his place. It was possible. I tried to focus on the party, on my friends, on enjoying the evening. But the footsteps kept going. Unvarying pace, unvarying path for 20 minutes straight. Nobody walks like that. Nobody paces the same route for that long without variation, without pause, without purpose. Around 10:30, the footsteps stopped. Just cut off mid-stride, sudden silence from above. Everyone in my apartment kind of laughed nervously, relieved, and we cranked the music back up, poured more drinks, tried to recapture the festive mood. Then about 15 minutes later, the footsteps started again. But this time, they weren't in the living room. They were in the bedroom. My bedroom was directly below Carl's, moving slowly, deliberately. And they seemed to be tracking us. I noticed it first. I'd gotten up to refill my glass in the kitchen, and the footsteps moved from Carl's bedroom toward his kitchen. When I went back to the living room, they followed. When a bunch of us congregated near the windows to watch some fireworks someone was setting off early down the street, the footsteps moved to Carl's windows. "Okay, that's creepy," Tom said, his face tilted toward the ceiling, watching the light fixture sway as the steps moved directly overhead. "Whoever's up there is following us around the apartment." "Don't be paranoid," Rachel said, but she sounded uncertain. "They're just walking around their own place." "In the dark," I pointed out. I'd been watching Carl's windows from outside when I came in from taking out the trash earlier. His apartment had been completely dark, curtains open, no lights visible. They've been walking around in the dark for almost an hour, following wherever we go. My friends exchanged glances, the party atmosphere evaporating. Someone turned down the music. In the relative quiet, the footsteps above were even more pronounced, heavy, deliberate, directly overhead, matching our movements. "Maybe you should call the super," Rachel suggested, "or the police, if Carl's out of town and someone's in his apartment." I was about to agree when the footsteps stopped again. Complete silence from above. We all stood there, frozen, listening, waiting to see if they'd resume. They didn't. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The party restarted tentatively, people trying to recapture the mood but not quite managing it. Everyone kept glancing at the ceiling, waiting for the next round of pacing. At 11:15, I went upstairs. I don't know why I did it. Curiosity, anger, the need to know what the hell was going on. Tom and Rachel came with me, Tom bringing an empty wine bottle like he thought he might need a weapon. Carl's door was on the 3rd floor at the end of the hallway. The corridor was dim, lit by a single weak bulb, our shadows stretching long behind us. Carl's welcome mat was still there, the potted plant he kept by his door still in place. Everything looked normal, untouched. I knocked. "Carl, you home?" No answer. The door was locked. I could see the deadbolt was engaged. I knocked again, louder. "Carl, it's your downstairs neighbor. Are you in there?" Silence. No footsteps, no movement, no sound at all from inside the apartment. "Maybe they left," Rachel whispered. "Maybe whoever was up there already went out." But I hadn't heard anyone on the stairs, and the stairwell was right next to my apartment. I would have heard someone passing, unless they'd left during the louder moments of the party when the music had been turned up and everyone had been talking. Tom tried the doorknob, just checking. Locked solid. He peered at the deadbolt. "Locked from the inside," he noted. "If someone's in there, they're still in there. If nobody's in there, how is it locked from inside?" We stood there for a moment, uncertain. Then Tom leaned down, looking at the gap at the bottom of the door. "No lights," he confirmed. "It's completely dark in there." "Maybe they went to bed," I suggested, though it was barely past 11, way too early for sleep on New Year's Eve. Maybe Carl's house sitter is sleeping. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. Nobody who'd been pacing for an hour, following sounds from the apartment below, would just suddenly go to bed. And nobody goes to bed with all the lights off before they even get in bed. We went back downstairs. I tried calling Carl again, straight to voicemail. I sent another text. "Seriously, are you home? Someone's been walking around up there all night." The party was subdued now, everyone aware of the weirdness, everyone periodically glancing at the ceiling. Midnight came and went with champagne and noisemakers, but the celebration felt forced. My friends started leaving around 12:30, earlier than planned, everyone citing early mornings or long drives home. By 1 a.m., only Rachel and Tom remained, helping me clean up. The apartment above was still silent, no footsteps, no sound at all. It felt worse somehow than when someone had been pacing. The silence had weight to it, presence, like someone holding very still and listening. "Maybe you should stay somewhere else tonight," Rachel suggested. "Come crash at my place. This is too weird." I almost agreed, but this was my home. I'd signed a lease, paid deposits, made this space mine. I wasn't going to let some creepy neighbor or house sitter drive me out for the night. After Rachel and Tom left, I tried to go to bed. I lay there in the dark, staring at my ceiling, hyper-aware of every sound in the building. The settling of old wood, the hum of the radiator, the distant sounds of other New Year's parties winding down. At 2:30 a.m., the footsteps started again. This time, they weren't pacing. They were standing still directly over my bedroom. I could hear the slight creak of floorboards as weight shifted from foot to foot. Someone was standing in Carl's bedroom right above where I lay in mine, just standing there. I grabbed my phone, heart hammering, and called the police. Explained that my upstairs neighbor was supposed to be out of town, that someone had been in his apartment for hours, that I thought there might be an intruder. They said they'd send someone over. The footsteps didn't move. For 20 minutes, while I waited for the police, someone stood directly above my bed, shifting weight occasionally, never moving from that spot. It felt like being watched, even through the ceiling, even without seeing anyone. Like someone knew exactly where I was and wanted me to know they knew. When the police arrived, 2 officers, young and professional, I explained everything. They went upstairs and knocked on Carl's door. No answer. They knocked again, announced themselves as police. Still no answer. "Do you have a key?" one of them asked me. "Or the super have one?" I called the super, woke him up, apologized profusely. He grumbled but came over 20 minutes later with his keyring, muttering about dramatics and parties and noise complaints. He unlocked Carl's door. The apartment was empty, completely, utterly empty. The police searched every room with flashlights, bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, closets. Nobody was there. Carl's furniture was in place, his belongings undisturbed, nothing obviously stolen or moved. The windows were locked from inside. The apartment was locked from inside. But there was nobody inside. "You sure you heard footsteps?" one officer asked, his tone suggesting he thought I'd imagined it. "Everyone at my party heard them," I insisted, "and for hours. Someone was up here, pacing back and forth, following us around." The super checked the locks, confirmed they were working properly. "Carl's the only one with keys," he said, "and I got the master. Nobody else can get in here." But someone had, or something had. The police filed a report, said they'd increase patrols in the area, told me to call if I heard anything else. They left around 3:30, the super with them, grumbling about lost sleep. I stood in my apartment alone, looking at the ceiling, and heard one last creak, just one, directly above where I was standing, like a footstep. Like someone taking one final step, letting me know they were still there, still watching. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch with all the lights on, watching my ceiling, waiting for the pacing to resume. It didn't. The apartment above stayed silent for the rest of the night. Carl came home 3 days later, exactly when he'd said he would. I went up to see him as soon as I heard him moving around, asked if anyone had been staying in his apartment while he was gone. "Staying here? No, of course not," he said, looking confused. "I was in Minnesota the whole time. Why?" I told him about New Year's Eve, about the footsteps, about calling the police. His expression went from confused to concerned, to something else, something harder to read. "That's weird," he said finally. "But I swear nobody was here. I locked up when I left and everything was exactly how I left it when I got back. Nothing moved, nothing missing." "Did you check your floors?" I asked. "For signs of pacing, wear patterns, anything?" He looked at me like I was crazy. "The floors look fine, same as always." But I'd heard those footsteps, my friends had heard them, hours of pacing directly overhead, following us around, standing in the dark. Someone or something had been in Carl's apartment that night and the police had found nothing. I still live in that building. I couldn't afford to break my lease and nothing else has happened. No more footsteps, no more mysterious pacing. Carl's still up there, living his normal life, occasionally playing music or having friends over, normal apartment sounds. But sometimes late at night when the building's quiet, I hear a single footstep from above. Just one, heavy and deliberate, like someone taking one step and then stopping. Like someone letting me know they're still there. Still watching through the floorboards. Still remembering New Year's Eve when they paced through Carl's apartment in the dark, following me and my friends, making their presence known. I asked other neighbors if they'd ever heard anything strange from Carl's apartment. Nobody had. Just me, apparently. Just on New Year's Eve and occasionally now when I'm alone and the building's quiet. I don't have parties anymore. I don't like the idea of gathering a group of people in my apartment, making noise, drawing attention. I don't like thinking about someone above me tracking where we are, pacing in the dark, waiting for a chance to remind us they're there. Carl moved out last month. New job, different city, totally normal reasons. The apartment's been empty since. The super's showing it to potential renters, but nobody's moved in yet. And I'm terrified of who will. Terrified it'll be someone who doesn't know what happened there, who doesn't know that sometimes, when the building's quiet, something walks through that apartment in the dark. Something that knows when people are below, that follows sounds and movement, that stands directly overhead and shifts its weight from foot to foot, listening, waiting. Or I'm terrified that it'll be someone who does know. Someone who heard about New Year's Eve, about the police being called, about the empty locked apartment. Someone who wants to be up there for exactly that reason. Someone who understands what was happening that night and wants to continue it. Either way, I check my ceiling every night before bed. I listen for that single footstep, that reminder that something or someone remembers me. And I wonder if they're waiting for another party, another gathering, another chance to pace through the apartment above in darkness, following sounds, making their presence known in a way that nobody can explain but nobody can deny. The building's quiet now, too quiet. And every creak of old wood, every settling sound makes me wonder if it's starting again. If tonight's the night the pacing resumes, the following begins, the presence above makes itself known once more. If whoever or whatever was in Carl's apartment that New Year's Eve has decided it's time for another visit, another demonstration that the spaces we think are empty sometimes aren't, and the neighbors we think are gone sometimes never really leave. Story 7. The Champagne Toast. The wedding reception was at the Riverside Hotel in their biggest ballroom, 200 guests, the whole thing elegant and expensive and perfect. My best friend since college, Michael, was marrying his girlfriend of 5 years, Jennifer. I was the best man, had given my toast earlier in the evening, the usual mix of embarrassing stories and heartfelt wishes that everyone had laughed and cried at in the right places. By 9 p.m., dinner was done and the real party had started. Dancing, drinks, that warm glow of happiness you get at a really good wedding when you're a little drunk and everyone you love is together in one place. I was at the gift table making sure all the envelopes and boxes were secure when I noticed the bottle. It was sitting slightly apart from the other gifts, a bottle of champagne in an expensive-looking presentation box. The box was dark wood, lined with velvet, very classy. But what caught my attention was the label someone had attached to the box, a small white card taped to the front. I leaned closer to read it. For the bride and groom, from someone who knows what you did. The words were printed, not handwritten, in a simple font that gave away nothing about who might have written them. I looked around, checking if anyone was watching me, but the nearest guests were all focused on the dance floor, where Michael and Jennifer were spinning through some complicated partner dance they'd clearly practiced. I carefully opened the champagne box. The bottle inside was real expensive too, judging by the label. Some French vintage I didn't recognize, but that looked fancy enough to be significant. There was nothing else in the box, no further message, no explanation. From someone who knows what you did. What the hell did that mean? I found the wedding planner, showed her the bottle and the card. She frowned, checked her clipboard, confirmed that this champagne wasn't part of the catering, wasn't something they'd provided or that the families had ordered. "Did you see who brought it?" I asked. She shook her head. "The gift table's been set up since before the reception started. Guests have been dropping things off all evening. I can't track every person who approaches it. I should have just removed it, thrown it away, forgotten about it. But Michael was my best friend. If there was something going on, something he needed to know about, I had to find out what it was." I pulled Michael aside during a break in the music, showed him the bottle and the card. His face went pale. "What does that mean?" I asked. "What did you do?" "Nothing," he said too quickly. I don't know what this is about, probably just someone's idea of a joke." But his hands were shaking when he took the card from me. He read it again, and I watched his expression shift from confusion to fear to something darker. Guilt, maybe, or recognition. "Michael," I pressed, "what's going on?" "It's nothing," he repeated, but his voice had gone hollow. "Just forget about it. Don't tell Jennifer, okay? Don't ruin her night with this." He walked away before I could argue, heading straight for the bar, ordering something strong. I watched him down a whiskey in one gulp, his shoulders tight, his usual easy smile completely gone. Jennifer found me a few minutes later. "Have you seen Michael? He looks upset." I hesitated, then showed her the champagne bottle and the card. Her reaction was even more pronounced than his. Her face went white, her hands flew to her mouth, and for a second I thought she might actually faint. "Where did this come from?" she whispered. "I don't know. Someone left it on the gift table." "Jennifer, what's going on? What is this about?" She was shaking her head, backing away from me, from the bottle, from the card. No, this can't be happening, not tonight, not here." She ran, literally ran, across the ballroom, grabbed Michael's arm, pulled him away from the bar and into the hallway that led to the private rooms. I followed because what else was I supposed to do? This was my best friend's wedding and something was very wrong. I found them in a side room, Jennifer crying, Michael holding her, both of them looking terrified. They didn't notice me at first and I heard fragments of their conversation. Couldn't know about that. We were so careful. If they're here tonight, if they saw... I cleared my throat and they both jumped. Michael's face was red, angry suddenly. "This is private, you need to leave." "No," I said firmly. Not until you tell me what's going on. Who left that bottle? What did you do?" Jennifer sobbed harder. Michael looked at her, then at me, and I saw the moment he made a decision, the moment he realized he couldn't keep this hidden anymore. "6 months ago," he said quietly, "Jennifer and I were in an accident, a car accident. We hit someone." My stomach dropped. "What?" "It was late. We were coming home from a party, and I wasn't completely sober. I shouldn't have been driving. And this guy stepped into the road out of nowhere, and I hit him." "Oh my God," I whispered. "Michael!" "We panicked," Jennifer said, her voice thick with tears. "We got out, checked on him, and he wasn't moving. There was so much blood. And Michael was drunk, and we thought if we called the police, he'd go to jail, his career would be over, everything would be ruined." "So you left," I said, feeling sick. "You left someone dying in the road." Michael's face crumpled. "We drove home. We cleaned up the car. We never told anyone. And we found out later, we checked the news every day, and there was never any report. No body found, no accident reported, like it never happened." "Maybe he was okay," Jennifer said desperately. "Maybe he walked away. Maybe we didn't hurt him as badly as we thought. Or maybe nobody found him," I said. "Maybe he died out there and nobody reported it." They both flinched. Michael looked at the card in his hand, reading it again. "Someone knows. Someone was there that night or found out somehow, and they know what we did. And they're here," Jennifer added, her voice barely audible. "At our wedding, watching us." The three of us stood there, and I felt the full weight of what they'd told me settling over us like a shroud. My best friend was a hit-and-run driver. He'd left someone to die and hidden it for months. And someone knew. "We need to find out who left the bottle," I said finally. "If they're here, we need to know who they are and what they want." We went back to the reception, all of us on edge now, scanning the crowd for anyone who looked out of place, anyone watching too closely. But everyone looked normal. Friends, family, co-workers, all here to celebrate, all laughing and dancing and having a good time. "It could be anyone," Michael said quietly. "Any of these people could know." The wedding planner approached with a concerned expression. "Is everything okay? You all look—" "The champagne bottle," I interrupted. "Do you have security footage? Cameras that would show who left it?" "We have cameras in the lobby and corridors, but not in the ballroom itself," she said. "Privacy concerns. But I can ask security to pull footage from the entrance, see if we can identify anyone suspicious." It took 45 minutes, but eventually we gathered in the hotel's security office, watching grainy footage of guests arriving throughout the evening. Hundreds of people, all carrying gifts, all looking happy and dressed up and normal. Then the security guard froze the frame. "There," he said, pointing. The timestamp showed 7:45 p.m., early in the reception. A man was approaching the gift table carrying the wooden box. He was wearing a dark suit, looked to be in his 40s or 50s, completely ordinary. He set the box down carefully, stood there for a moment looking at it, then walked away. "Do you know him?" I asked Michael and Jennifer. They both leaned closer, studying the frozen image. Michael shook his head slowly. "I've never seen him before in my life." "Neither have I," Jennifer whispered. "Can you follow him?" I asked the guard. "See where he goes?" The guard switched camera angles, tracking the man's movements through the hotel. He walked through the lobby, out the main entrance, got into a car in the parking lot, and drove away. The license plate was visible for just a moment before he pulled out of frame. Michael was on his phone immediately, texting someone. "My cousin's a cop," he explained. "I'm asking him to run the plate. See who owns that car." We waited. The reception continued without us, music and laughter filtering through the walls, everyone oblivious to the crisis unfolding in the security office. Michael's phone finally buzzed. He read the message and his face went gray. The car is registered to David Brennan, age 47. Reported missing 6 months ago. Last seen walking home from a bar on the night of... His voice broke. On the night of the accident. Jennifer made a sound like a wounded animal. He's alive. Oh God, he's alive. The man we hit is alive and he was here tonight. But the police said he was missing, I pointed out. If he's alive, why hasn't he gone to them? Why hasn't he reported what you did? Nobody had an answer. We just sat there realizing that the man Michael and Jennifer had left for dead had somehow survived, had spent 6 months. Doing what? Recovering, planning? And now he'd appeared at their wedding, left them a message, let them know he knew what they'd done. What does he want? Jennifer asked. Why leave the champagne? Why not just go to the police? Michael was staring at the frozen image of David Brennan's face on the security monitor. Maybe he wants us to know he could. Maybe he wants us to spend the rest of our lives wondering when he'll finally tell someone. Maybe this is his revenge, keeping us in fear forever. Or maybe there was something else. I thought about the champagne, about the expensive bottle with its disturbing message. A gift, but also a threat. A toast, but also a warning. The USB drive, the wedding planner said suddenly from the doorway where she'd been hovering nervously. I forgot. When I was checking the gift table earlier, I found a USB drive taped underneath. I thought it had fallen off someone's gift, but now... She held up a small black drive. We plugged it into the security office computer. The drive contained photo files. Dozens of them, photos of Michael and Jennifer, in their home, through their bedroom window, through their kitchen window, at the grocery store, at the gym, at work. Months and months of surveillance photos dating back to just after the accident. David Brennan had been watching them, learning their routines, their habits, their lives, documenting everything, proving he could get close, could track them, could invade their privacy whenever he wanted. And at the end of the photo files, there was a video, just 10 seconds long. Dashcam footage from the night of the accident. Michael's car hitting a pedestrian. The pedestrian going down hard. Michael and Jennifer getting out, checking him briefly, then agonizingly getting back in the car and driving away. Leaving him there. Crystal clear video evidence of everything they'd done. He has proof, Jennifer said numbly. He has video proof. He could send this to the police anytime he wants and we'd go to prison. So why hasn't he? I asked. Michael was still staring at the screen, at the frozen frame showing his car driving away from the crumpled figure on the road. Because this is better. For him, this is better revenge. We can never feel safe. Never feel secure. Every day for the rest of our lives, we'll wonder if today's the day he sends the video. If today's the day everything ends, he gets to watch us suffer, watch us live in fear, and we can't do anything about it because if we go to the police first, we're admitting what we did. We could delete the video, Jennifer suggested desperately. We could find him, get rid of the evidence. There's always going to be more evidence, I said quietly. He's been planning this for months. He probably has copies everywhere. You can't make this go away. We stood there in that security office, the three of us, looking at proof of my best friend's crime and proof of the revenge being taken against him. The wedding reception continued in the ballroom, everyone celebrating, completely unaware that the marriage they were toasting was already haunted. Michael and Jennifer went back to the reception eventually. They had to. It was their wedding, their party, their celebration. They smiled and danced and cut the cake and thanked their guests, all while knowing someone had been watching them, documenting them, preparing this moment. They never opened that bottle of champagne. I took it home with me after the wedding, locked it in my closet because neither of them wanted it in their house. Sometimes I take it out and look at that card. For the bride and groom from someone who knows what you did. Michael and Jennifer are still married. They bought a house, both got promotions from the outside, their life looks perfect. But I know better. I know they check their locks obsessively, that they installed security cameras around their property, that they barely sleep. I know they live every day waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the video to surface, for David Brennan to decide he's made them suffer enough and it's time to actually destroy them. He hasn't sent the video to the police, not yet. But they know he could, anytime, for any reason. Maybe if they get too happy, too comfortable. Maybe when they have kids, maybe on their anniversary or Michael's birthday, or some random Tuesday when David Brennan wakes up and decides the time has come. I don't see them as much anymore. It's too hard, knowing what I know, carrying their secret, wondering if I should have gone to the police myself, wondering if by keeping quiet I'm complicit in what they did. But mostly I think about David Brennan, about how he spent 6 months recovering from injuries that should have been reported, should have been treated, preparing his revenge instead. About how he found out who hit him, where they lived, everything about their lives. About how he showed up at their wedding, left his message, let them know he was watching. And I wonder where he is now. If he's still watching them, still documenting their lives, still sitting on that video, waiting for the perfect moment to press send. If he'll ever give them the closure of actually going to the police, or if he'll keep them in this state of permanent terror, never knowing when their past will finally catch up with them. Sometimes I look at that champagne bottle, at that card with its 9 words of damnation, and I think about opening it, about seeing if there's anything else inside, any other message David Brennan wanted to leave. But I never do, because some bottles are better left unopened, some toasts are better left unmade, and some secrets are better left in the dark, even when everyone knows they're there. Michael and Jennifer know someone's watching. They know someone has proof. They know their perfect life could end any moment with a simple email, a simple phone call, a simple decision by the man they left bleeding in the road 6 months before they said, "I do." And that's David Brennan's real revenge, not sending the video, but letting them know he has it. Not destroying their lives, but letting them destroy themselves with fear and guilt and the constant crushing weight of waiting for justice they know is deserved, but hope will never come. The champagne sits in my closet, dark and expensive and poisoned with knowledge. A gift nobody wanted, a toast nobody will drink, a reminder that sometimes the worst revenge isn't what actually happens to you, but what might happen, what could happen, what you spend every waking moment terrified will happen. And somewhere out there, David Brennan is watching, waiting, deciding when or if the waiting finally ends. Story 8. The Guest Who Remembered Everything. I met him at Sarah's housewarming party in late September, just a quiet guy in dark jeans and a gray sweater, standing near the drinks table and keeping to himself. The party was crowded. Sarah had invited what seemed like half the neighborhood, plus all her co-workers, plus friends from her old building, and I didn't recognize most of the faces. So when I ended up next to this guy while refilling my wine, I made small talk like you do. "How do you know Sarah?" I asked, the standard party opening. "Through the neighborhood," he said, smiling in a polite, unremarkable way. "I live a few blocks over, just moved here recently too." "Nice," I said. "I'm a few streets down, over on Maple, been here about a year." We talked for maybe 10 minutes, nothing deep. He mentioned he was working from home, freelance graphic design, the kind of flexible job that explained why he could make a 3 p.m. housewarming party on a Saturday. I told him about my job at the library, complained about the summer reading program we'd just finished, mentioned how nice it was to finally have a friend in the area. Normal conversation. Forgettable. The kind of exchange you have at parties and never think about again. Then 2 weeks later, he showed up at my door. It was a Sunday afternoon and I was in sweats and a ratty t-shirt, not expecting anyone. The doorbell rang and when I opened it, there he was. Same gray sweater, holding a small wrapped box, smiling like we were old friends. "Hey," he said brightly. "Thought I'd stop by with a housewarming gift. You mentioned at the party that you just moved here, and I realized I never properly welcomed you to the neighborhood." I stared at him, confused. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" His smile didn't falter. "We met at Sarah's party a couple weeks ago. We talked by the drinks table." "Oh, right. The freelance designer." But that had been a 10-minute conversation at a crowded party. Why would he remember me well enough to show up at my house? And more importantly, how do you know where I live? "You mentioned you were on Maple Street," he said easily. "And I saw you walking home the other day, so I figured I'd drop this by. Hope that's not too weird?" It was weird. It was definitely weird, but he seemed friendly. And maybe this was just one of those neighborhood things, people being welcoming. Maybe I was being paranoid. "That's really thoughtful," I said, taking the box. It was light, wrapped in blue paper with a white ribbon. "Thank you." "No problem. I'm Jake, by the way. Don't think I properly introduced myself at the party." "Emma," I said, though something told me he already knew that. He didn't leave immediately, just stood there on my doorstep, smiling, looking at me expectantly. After an awkward pause, I said, "Well, thanks again for this. That was really nice of you." "Of course. Hey, you mentioned you liked that coffee shop on 3rd Street, right? The one with the good scones? Maybe we could grab coffee sometime. Get to know the neighborhood together since we're both kinda new." I hadn't mentioned any coffee shop. I was certain I hadn't. Our conversation at the party had been about jobs and the neighborhood in general terms, nothing specific about my routines or favorite places. "I don't think I mentioned that," I said slowly. "Oh, maybe I'm misremembering," he said, but his smile didn't change. "Anyway, the offer stands. It'd be nice to have a friend around here." "Yeah, sure," I said vaguely, already backing into my doorway, suddenly very eager to have a door between us. "Thanks again for the gift." I closed the door before he could say anything else, locked it, watched through the peephole as he stood there for a few more seconds before finally turning and walking down my driveway. When he was gone, I opened the gift. Inside was a candle, vanilla-scented, from a nice boutique in town. Completely appropriate, completely harmless. But tucked underneath the candle was a small card. No envelope, just a plain white card with a handwritten note. "For your new home. Hope you're settling in well. Looking forward to getting to know you better. Jake." Something about the phrasing made my skin crawl. Looking forward to getting to know you better. Like he didn't already know enough. Like he hadn't somehow known where I lived and which coffee shop I preferred despite our brief, superficial conversation. I called Sarah. "Hey, weird question. That guy Jake, the one you invited to your housewarming? What do you know about him?" "Jake?" Sarah sounded confused. "I don't know anyone named Jake. I definitely didn't invite anyone by that name." My stomach dropped. "Are you sure? Gray sweater, dark hair, said he lived in the neighborhood. We talked at your party." "Emma, I have no idea who you're talking about. What party? When was this?" "Your housewarming. 2 weeks ago. He said he knew you from the neighborhood." A long pause. "I didn't have a housewarming party. I've been meaning to, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. Too busy unpacking." I felt cold suddenly despite the warm afternoon. "Sarah, I was at your party. There were like 30 people there. 3 weeks ago, Saturday afternoon." "Emma, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't had any parties since I moved. Are you feeling okay?" I insisted I was fine, hung up, checked my phone. The date Sarah had supposedly had her party. I pulled up my calendar, checked my texts from that day. Nothing. No invite. No mention of a party, no photos. Like it hadn't happened. But I remembered it. I remembered being there, remembered the conversations, remembered meeting Jake by the drinks table. I remembered Sarah's apartment, the layout, the decor, the other guests. Unless I'd dreamed it. Unless I'd confused it with some other party, some other time. But no, the details were too vivid, too specific. I knew what I'd experienced. I told myself I was being paranoid. That maybe I'd misunderstood something, that maybe Jake had been at some other party and I'd gotten confused. That the coffee shop comment had been a lucky guess. That knowing where I lived was just neighborhood coincidence. Then, 3 days later, I ran into him at the grocery store. I was in the produce section picking through apples when he appeared beside me with his cart, smiling like we were best friends. "Emma, good to see you again. How's the candle? I wasn't sure if vanilla was your scent, but I remember you mentioning at the party that you liked vanilla coffee creamer, so I figured it was a safe bet." I had mentioned that. At Sarah's party that apparently never happened, I'd made some throwaway comment about preferring vanilla to hazelnut, a detail so small I'd forgotten it myself until he reminded me. "Yeah, it's nice," I said cautiously, moving my cart slightly away from his. "Thanks again?" "No problem." He picked up an apple, examined it, put it back. "You know, I was thinking, you mentioned you usually shop here on Wednesdays after work, right? We should coordinate, make it a regular thing, shopping buddy system." I had never told him when I shopped, ever, to anyone, including Sarah at the party that supposedly didn't happen. But he was right. I did usually shop on Wednesdays after my shift at the library. "How do you know that?" I asked, my voice coming out sharper than I intended. "You told me," he said simply. "At Sarah's party. We talked for a while. Remember? You told me all about your routine, work, coffee shop, grocery store, your Thursday book club at the library." I did have a Thursday book club, but I'd never mentioned it to him, I was certain. "I need to go," I said, abandoning my cart and walking quickly toward the exit. I could feel him watching me, could sense his confusion or amusement or whatever emotion he was feeling, but I didn't care. I needed out of that store, away from him, back to somewhere safe. When I got home, I locked every door and window, checked them twice, drew all the curtains. Then I sat on my couch and tried to remember exactly what I'd told Jake at that party. The conversation had been brief, superficial, hadn't it? Just jobs and neighborhoods and moving, nothing personal, nothing about my schedule or my habits or my favorite places. But he knew those things. He knew details about my life that I hadn't shared, couldn't have shared in a 10-minute conversation with a stranger at a party. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Hey Emma, it's Jake. Hope I didn't weird you out at the store. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. You left pretty quickly." "How did you get my number?" I demanded. "You gave it to me at the party. We exchanged numbers so we could meet up for coffee, remember?" I hadn't. I absolutely hadn't. I never gave my number to strangers at parties. It was a rule I'd had since college. But when I checked my phone, there it was. Jake in my contacts with a number I didn't recognize, dated 3 weeks ago on the day of Sarah's party that didn't exist. "I need you to stop contacting me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know what you think is happening here, but I'm not interested in friendship or coffee or anything else. Please leave me alone." A pause. Did I do something wrong? "I'm sorry if I came on too strong. I just thought we had a good conversation and I was excited to make a friend in the area. I'm not trying to be creepy, I promise." But it was creepy. It was deeply, profoundly creepy. "Please don't contact me again," I repeated and hung up. I blocked his number, changed my grocery shopping day. started taking different routes to work, told the library staff that if anyone asked for me by name to say I wasn't available. I was being paranoid, I knew. He'd just been an overly friendly guy, probably socially awkward, probably harmless. But something about the situation felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. Then 2 weeks later, I got an email. My personal email, the one I only used for close friends and family, the one that wasn't publicly listed anywhere. The subject line read, "Looking forward to seeing you again." The body of the email was longer. "Hi Emma, I hope you're doing well. I realize I might have made you uncomfortable and I apologize for that. I just feel like we have a real connection, and I wanted you to know that I've been thinking about you a lot since we met. I know you asked me not to contact you, but I couldn't help myself. You're such an interesting person. Your job at the library, your love of historical fiction, especially Victorian-era novels, your habit of running early in the morning before work, your close relationship with your sister in Portland, your anxiety about the new management at the library. We have so much in common, and I feel like we could really be great friends if you'd just give me a chance. I've been to the library a few times hoping to run into you, but you must have a different schedule than I thought. And I've been to that coffee shop on 3rd Street, thought I might see you there on your usual Tuesday morning stop, but no luck. Anyway, I don't want to pressure you. Just wanted you to know I'm here, in the neighborhood, and I'm looking forward to the next time we cross paths, maybe at the farmer's market this Saturday. I know you usually go around 9 a.m. Your friend, Jake." My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. He knew about my sister. He knew I preferred Victorian novels. He knew about my problems at work, about the new manager I'd been complaining about, but only to close friends, not to strangers at parties. He knew my running schedule, my coffee routine, my weekend plans. He'd been watching me, following me, learning my life in detail that went far beyond any conversation we could have possibly had. I called the police, filed a report for stalking, showed them the email, explained about the grocery store encounter and the gift he'd brought to my house. They took it seriously, said they'd investigate, asked if I had any photos of Jake or knew his last name. I didn't. I had no proof he even existed beyond my own memory and the gifts he'd left. No one else remembered him from Sarah's party. The phone number I'd blocked was disconnected. The email had been sent from a temporary account that was already deleted. The police said they'd increase patrols in my area, told me to document any further contact, to call immediately if I saw him again. They were kind, professional, and I could tell they thought I was either exaggerating or dealing with an overzealous admirer who'd back off once confronted. But I knew better. This wasn't an admirer. This was someone who'd been studying me, learning me, preparing for something I couldn't predict. A week later, he showed up at the farmer's market. I saw him across the stall, standing near the vegetable vendor I always bought from, watching me with that same pleasant, unremarkable smile. When our eyes met, he waved. I ran. Literally ran through the market, knocking over someone's bag of tomatoes, not caring about the stares, just needing to get away. I made it to my car, locked the doors, drove home shaking so badly I nearly ran a red light. When I got home, there was another gift on my doorstep. A book, a Victorian novel I'd mentioned wanting to read. No card this time, just the book, wrapped in the same blue paper with a white ribbon. I called the police again. They came, collected the book, the wrapping, said they'd dust for fingerprints. They asked again if I knew his last name, where he lived, any identifying information that could help them track him down. I had nothing. Just Jake, a ghost who appeared at parties that didn't happen, who knew intimate details of my life despite minimal conversation, who seemed to be everywhere I went while leaving no trace of his existence. Have you considered he might have been at other parties you've been to? The officer suggested. That maybe you've seen him more than once but only remember the recent encounter? That would explain how he knows so much about you if he's been following you for longer than you realize. The thought made me sick. How many parties had I been to in the past year? How many crowded rooms full of strangers and friends of friends and people I'd exchanged pleasantries with and forgotten? How many of those faces could have been Jake, standing in the background, listening, learning, preparing? I started looking at old photos from parties, gatherings, any social events I'd attended, and I found him in the background of a birthday party from 3 months ago, partially obscured by other people, at a work function from last spring, standing near the door, at a neighborhood barbecue from summer, talking to someone I didn't recognize. He'd been there, at party after party, event after event, always on the periphery, never the focus, easily missed and easily forgotten. He'd been watching me for months, maybe longer, attending events I went to, listening to my conversations, studying my life. "See you at the next one," he'd said when I'd told him to leave me alone at my door. I thought he meant the next time we randomly encountered each other. But now I understood. He meant the next party, the next gathering, the next event I'd attend where he'd already be waiting, watching, adding to his collection of details about who I was and how I lived. I stopped going to parties, stopped accepting invites to gatherings, barbecues, celebrations. I couldn't risk it. Couldn't risk walking into a room and finding him there, smiling at me across the crowd, reminding me that he was watching, that he remembered everything, that he knew more about my life than I did about his. I changed my routines completely. Different grocery store, different coffee shop, different route to work. I moved 3 months later, didn't tell anyone my new address except my family and my boss. I made my social media private, changed my email, got a new phone number, and I've never seen Jake again. Never gotten another gift, another email, another encounter at a store or market. He's vanished as completely as he appeared, leaving behind only the memory of his presence and the knowledge that he's out there somewhere remembering. Because that's what terrifies me most. Not that he's still watching, but that he remembers. He remembers every detail he learned about me, every routine he observed, every piece of my life he cataloged during those months of surveillance. He knows who I was, maybe who I still am underneath the changes I've made to my life. And sometimes at parties I finally feel safe enough to attend again. I find myself scanning the crowd, looking for a face that's just familiar enough to recognize, but not quite familiar enough to place. Looking for someone standing near the drinks table, keeping to themselves, listening to conversations and learning about the people around them. Looking for the next person Jake is studying, the next person who'll have a conversation they think is forgettable, only to have someone show up at their door 2 weeks later with a gift and a smile and the kind of detailed knowledge about their life that should be impossible. Because I don't think I was the first, and I know I won't be the last. He's out there somewhere, attending parties, meeting new people, having 10-minute conversations that he'll remember in perfect detail while his victims forget them immediately. Building his knowledge, preparing his approach, waiting for the right moment to reveal that he's been watching all along. And the worst part is that his victims won't realize it until it's too late, until he's already learned where they live, what they like, when they shop, who they love, until he's already embedded himself into their consciousness as a friendly face from a party they can barely remember. Someone harmless and forgettable who's actually been memorizing every detail of their existence. I still have the candle he gave me. I keep it in a box in my closet, never lit, never opened. A reminder of how easily someone can learn your life, how much information you reveal without realizing it, how vulnerable you are to anyone who's really paying attention while you go through your days thinking you're invisible. Jake taught me that, and even though I've changed my life, changed my routines, tried to become someone new, I know he still remembers the old me, Still has that catalog of information in his head about who I was, where I went, what I loved. And if he ever decides to find me again, he'll know exactly where to look because he remembers everything. And forgetting isn't an option when someone's made you their life study, their project, their obsession. He's out there, at another party, meeting someone new, having another conversation they'll forget while he remembers every word. And somewhere, eventually, he'll show up at their door with a gift and a smile. And they'll wonder, just like I did, how he knows so much about their life when they can barely remember meeting him at all.